When the lawyer said my name instead of my brother's, I watched David's face change. It wasn't anger at first. It was confusion. The kind you see in a child who's been told the sky isn't blue after all. I leave everything to my daughter, Grace, the lawyer read, his voice flat and professional. My home, my savings, my mother's jewelry, the land in Cumberland County. All of it goes to Grace Eleanor Morris. David leaned forward in his chair. There must be a mistake. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and continued reading. To my son David, I leave this letter. He slid a sealed envelope across the mahogany table. And my hope that he will one day understand. I stared at that envelope like it was a living thing. My mother had been gone 3 weeks, and already she was unraveling secrets from the grave. We'd never been a warm family, not in the way you see in movies. But we were stable. Predictable. Mom worked as a school librarian for 37 years. She made pot roast on Sundays. She kept photo albums organized by year, each picture labeled in her careful handwriting. She was the kind of woman who ironed dish towels and sent birthday cards exactly 1 week early. And she'd never, in all my 34 years, told me I was adopted. David's hand trembled as he picked up the envelope. He was 2 years older than me, taller, with our mother's sharp jawline and pale gray eyes. I'd spent my whole childhood trying to earn the easy affection she gave him. She never missed his basketball games. She framed his report cards. When he graduated college, she cried, real tears that left mascara tracks down her cheeks. When I graduated, she took me to dinner at Applebee's and told me she was proud, but her eyes were somewhere else the whole time. David. I started, but he held up his hand. Not now, Grace. The lawyer cleared his throat. There are some additional documents. Estate papers, property deeds, bank statements. I'll need both of you to sign. I'm not signing anything until I read this. David stood abruptly, the chair scraping against hardwood. He walked out of the office without looking back. I sat there in the silence that followed, feeling the weight of my mother's house keys in my pocket. I'd been living there since the funeral, sleeping in my childhood bedroom with its faded yellow wallpaper and the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a rabbit. David had his own place across town. A nice townhouse he'd bought with money Mom helped him with for the down payment. Money she'd apparently saved for him. Money that was now legally mine. The lawyer was watching me with the careful expression of someone who'd seen family drama unfold in this office too many times to count. Miss Morris, if you'd like, I can explain the... No, I said quietly. Let me talk to my brother first. I found David in the parking lot, sitting in his truck with the door open, the letter crumpled in his fist. His face was red, blotchy. For a moment I thought he was crying, but when he looked up at me, his eyes were dry and hard. Did you know? His voice was low, dangerous. Know what? He laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was the sound of something breaking. Don't do that. Did you know you were adopted? The word hung in the air between us. Adopted. It should have felt like a revelation. But instead it felt like confirmation of something I'd always suspected, but never had the courage to name. No, I said. I didn't know. She chose you. He said it like an accusation. She went out and picked you like you were a puppy at a shelter, and she gave you everything. David. Do you want to know what this letter says? He stood up, towering over me. I'd forgotten how big my brother was. How his presence could fill a space. Do you want to know what our mother, my mother, felt like she needed to explain? I didn't answer. My throat felt tight. He smoothed out the crumpled paper, his hands shaking. I'll read it to you. She wrote. David, I need you to understand something I could never tell you while I was alive. You were not conceived in love. You were the result of violence done to me when I was 21 years old. I kept you because I believed every life deserved a chance, but I could never look at you without remembering the worst night of my life. The world tilted. I reached for his truck to steady myself. Grace, he continued, his voice cracking, was born to the only man I ever truly loved. When he died in a car accident and his wife couldn't care for their baby, I adopted Grace. She was all I had left of him. She was my second chance at the family I should have had. David folded the letter carefully, precisely, like our mother would have done. So you see, Grace, you're not my sister. You're the daughter of Mom's dead boyfriend. And I'm just the bastard she was stuck with because she was too Catholic to get an abortion. That's not. I started, but the words dissolved. What could I possibly say? The house, he said, his voice eerily calm now. The money. The land. That was supposed to be mine. I'm her actual son. Her blood. And she gave it all to you because you remind her of some guy who died 35 years ago. He climbed into his truck and slammed the door. Through the window, I could see his jaw working, the muscles in his neck tight with rage. I stood there in the parking lot as he drove away, the afternoon sun beating down on my shoulders, and tried to remember a single moment when my mother had told me she loved me. I couldn't find one. I drove back to Mom's house, my house now, I supposed, in a daze. The steering wheel felt unfamiliar in my hands, like I was piloting someone else's car, living someone else's life. The house sat at the end of Maple Street, a modest two-story colonial with blue shutters and a front porch that sagged slightly on the left side. Mom had lived here for 40 years. She'd planted the dogwood tree in the front yard the year she bought it. I used to climb that tree as a kid, hiding in its branches with library books while David played baseball in the street with his friends. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Her reading glasses on the coffee table. A half-finished crossword puzzle. The kitchen smelled like lemon dish soap and something else. That particular scent of a house where someone had lived alone for too long. Quiet and still and waiting. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten thousands of meals, and pulled out my phone. I had 17 missed calls. Aunt Linda. Mom's cousin Patricia. David's number 5 times. I set the phone face down and stared at the salt and pepper shakers shaped like chickens that had been there since I was 7. The truth was settling into my bones now, cold and heavy. I wasn't Grace Eleanor Morris, born in mercy and kept in duty. I was Grace Eleanor Harris. I had to have been, before the adoption. Daughter of a man whose name I didn't even know. A man my mother had loved enough to take his child and raise her as her own. And David. God, David. I'd spent 34 years trying to understand why he was the golden child. Why Mom attended every one of his events, but always seemed to have a headache when it came to mine. Why she paid for his college, but I'd had to take out loans. Why she looked at him with such a complicated expression. Something I'd mistaken for love but now understood was something closer to obligation. She'd looked at me with distance. But David she'd looked at with pain. My phone buzzed. A text from David. We need to talk about the will. This isn't over. I turned the phone off completely. The next morning, I started going through Mom's papers. I told myself I was just organizing, preparing for whatever legal battles might come. But really I was searching. Looking for any mention of my real father. Any clue about who I actually was. I found the documents in a fireproof box in the back of her closet. Underneath a stack of old winter sweaters that smelled like mothballs. My adoption papers. Birth certificate with my original name, Grace Eleanor Harris. Mother, Margaret Ann Harris. Father, James Michael Harris. There was a death certificate too. James Michael Harris died March 15, 1990, at age 26. Car accident. Single vehicle collision on Route 42. And photographs. So many photographs. My mother, younger, smiling in a way I'd never seen her smile. Wrapped in the arms of a man with dark curly hair and laugh lines around his eyes. They were at a beach somewhere. A carnival. A Christmas tree lot. In every photo, Mom looked luminous. Happy in a way that seemed impossible now. There was a letter tucked into the stack, written in Mom's handwriting but addressed to no one. Dated 2 months after James died. I went to the hospital today. Margaret asked me to come. She's been in psychiatric care since the accident. They say she had a complete breakdown. She can't even hold the baby. Grace is 3 months old, perfect and innocent, and her mother can't bear to look at her because she has James's eyes. Margaret begged me to take her. You loved him too, she said. You should have been the one who married him. Please, please take her. Give her the life I can't. So I did. I brought Grace home. David was 2 years old, and I'd been raising him alone, trying to find some purpose in a child I never wanted. But Grace is James's. When I hold her, I can pretend, just for a moment, that he's still here. My hands were shaking. I set the letter down on the bed, on top of the old wedding ring quilt Mom had made the year I graduated high school. The quilt she'd given to me, not David. All those years, I thought she was distant because I wasn't good enough. But she'd been distant because I was too much. Because every time she looked at me, she saw a ghost. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I knew it was David before I opened the door. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled. Behind him, I could see his truck parked halfway onto the lawn, like he'd been in too much of a hurry to care. "I want you to contest the will," he said without preamble. "Tell the lawyer there was a mistake, that Mom was sick at the end, not thinking clearly." "She wasn't sick, David. You know that." "Then tell them." He stopped, ran his hand through his hair. "Grace, this is my inheritance. My birthright. I'm her actual son." She made her choice. A choice based on what? On some dead guy from 40 years ago. His voice rose. "I'm the one who took care of her. I'm the one who mowed her lawn and fixed her sink and drove her to doctor's appointments. Where were you? You barely called her. You moved 3 towns away the second you could." He wasn't wrong. I had kept my distance. It had hurt less than trying. "I didn't know," I said quietly. "I didn't know any of this." "Well, now you do. So make it right. Sign over the house. The money. You don't need it anyway. You have your own place, your own life. I'm the one with a family to think about." "You have a family?" He flushed. "Amanda's pregnant. 3 months. We were going to tell Mom, but she died before we could." Something twisted in my chest. "Congratulations." "Don't." His jaw tightened. "Don't pretend like you care. Just sign the papers. Let me have what should have been mine from the start." I thought about my mother's letter. About Margaret Harris in a psychiatric ward, unable to look at her own daughter. About James Michael Harris dying on a dark road, leaving behind 2 women who loved him, and a baby who would never know his voice. "No," I said. David's face went blank. For a moment I thought he might hit me. His hands curled into fists at his sides, and I could see the vein in his temple pulsing. "What did you say?" I said no. "I'm not signing anything over." My voice was steadier than I felt. Mom made her decision. Maybe it wasn't fair, but it was hers to make. "Fair." He laughed, harsh and bitter. "You want to talk about fair?" I spent my entire childhood watching her flinch every time I walked into a room. Do you know what that does to a kid? Knowing your own mother can barely stand to look at you. "David." "No, you don't get it. You got the soft looks, the gentle corrections. I got silence. I got her turning away. I thought I'd done something wrong. That if I was just good enough, smart enough, successful enough, she'd finally love me the way she was supposed to." His voice cracked. "And now I find out it was never about me at all. It was about him. Some rapist who—" "He wasn't a rapist," I said sharply. "James was her boyfriend. The man who assaulted her was someone else." He stared at me. "How do you know that?" "I found letters. Documents. Mom kept everything." I stepped back from the door. "Do you want to come in? Do you want to see them?" For a long moment he didn't move. Then slowly he nodded. We sat at the kitchen table like we had as children. Him on one side, me on the other, a careful distance maintained. I spread out the photographs, the letters, the documents I'd found. David picked up the photo of Mom and James at the beach. Studied it with an expression I couldn't read. "She looks happy," he said finally. "She was." He set the photo down carefully. "So what happened? If this James guy was so great, why didn't they get married?" I handed him another letter, dated 1988. His wife, my birth mother, got pregnant first. He married her. Mom found out and ended things. She was 21, working at the library, and she met someone at a bar one night. Someone who seemed nice at first. David read the letter silently. I watched his face change as he absorbed the words. Mom's neat handwriting describing the assault. The police report she never filed because she was ashamed. The pregnancy test 2 months later. The decision to keep the baby because she'd been raised Catholic and couldn't imagine any other choice. "She named me after her father," David said quietly. "David Lawrence. I always thought it meant she loved me." Maybe she tried to. Tried. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, I could feel that. The trying. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. A car drove past. Normal sounds in a world that had stopped feeling normal. I have a son, David said suddenly. Amanda and I found out a month ago. We're having a boy. I looked up at him. David, that's wonderful. Is it? His eyes were wet. How am I supposed to be a father when I don't even know what that looks like? Mom couldn't love me because of how I was made. What if I can't love him? What if there's something broken in me, something that got passed down? Stop. I reached across the table, caught his hand. You are not what happened to her. You're not responsible for someone else's violence. Then why did she punish me for it my whole life? I didn't have an answer. We sat there holding hands across the table. Two people who'd grown up in the same house but in completely different families. The house has an apartment above the garage, I said finally. Did you know that? Mom used to rent it out when we were kids, but it's been empty for years. He pulled his hand back. What are you saying? I'm saying Amanda's pregnant and you need space. I'm saying this house is too big for one person. I'm saying maybe Mom left it to me, but that doesn't mean you don't belong here. I don't want your charity, Grace. It's not charity. It's family. I met his eyes. We're still that, aren't we? Even with all this mess? He was quiet for a long time. Then, I don't know what we are anymore. Over the next few weeks, David and I fell into an uneasy truce. He didn't move into the garage apartment, but he stopped calling his lawyer about contesting the will. I started going through Mom's belongings, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what might matter to David. I found her journals in a trunk in the attic. Decades of them, dating back to when she was 19. I read them late at night, sitting on the floor of her bedroom, learning about a woman I'd never really known. She'd been funny once. Optimistic. She'd wanted to be a writer, had filled notebooks with stories and poems. Then the assault happened, and the entries changed. Became darker. More careful. She wrote about David's birth like it was something that happened to her, not something she participated in. He looks like his father, she wrote when David was 6 months old. I try not to see it, but it's there in the shape of his eyes, the way he cries. I keep him clean and fed and safe, and I tell myself that's enough. That duty is a kind of love. But then years later, after she adopted me, Grace smiled at me today. Really smiled, the way James used to smile. For the first time since he died, I felt something warm in my chest. Maybe this is what it's supposed to feel like. Maybe this is what I missed. I cried reading that. Not because it made me feel special, but because it made me understand how much we'd all lost. How trauma had moved through our family like a stone dropped in water, ripples spreading out in every direction. David found me like that, crying on the floor surrounded by journals. He sat down beside me without a word, picked up one of the notebooks, and started reading. We stayed there until dawn, piecing together the truth of who we were. The first Sunday after we read through Mom's journals, David showed up at the house with Amanda. She was small and blonde, with nervous hands that kept touching her barely their belly. I'd met her twice before, once at Mom's funeral and once at their engagement party 3 years ago, where Mom had smiled politely and left early with a headache. I wanted Amanda to see the house, David said from the doorway. If that's okay. Of course it's okay. I stepped back to let them in. Come in. I made coffee. Amanda's eyes went wide as she walked through the living room, taking in the built-in bookshelves, the bay window with its window seat, the hardwood floors that creaked in all the familiar places. It's beautiful, she said softly. David talks about this house all the time, but I never realized. Mom took good care of it, I said. And she had. Whatever else she'd failed at, she'd maintained this house with careful precision. Every wall freshly painted. Every fixture polished. A monument to control in a life that had spun out of it. We sat in the kitchen, always the kitchen, the heart of every difficult conversation. And I poured coffee while Amanda asked gentle questions about Mom, about the neighborhood, about whether the dogwood tree in front really bloomed as beautifully as David remembered. It does, I told her. Every April like clockwork. David had been quiet, his hands wrapped around his mug. Finally, he said, I told Amanda everything. About the will. About James. About all of it. Amanda reached over and squeezed his hand. I told him he was being an idiot about the inheritance. I blinked. You did. Your mom made her choice for her reasons. Were they fair? Maybe not. But grief isn't fair. Trauma isn't fair. She looked at David with a fierceness I hadn't expected. And he needs to stop acting like money will fix what's broken. David's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. The thing is, Amanda continued, turning to me, we don't need the house. We have our townhouse. But David needs to know he still belongs somewhere. That he wasn't just tolerated. The word hung in the air. Tolerated. It was exactly the right word for what Mom had done to David. Not rejected, not abandoned, but something more insidious. She'd kept him at arm's length his entire life, doing her duty but never quite letting him in. The garage apartment, I said. It needs work, but it's structurally sound. 2 bedrooms, a full bathroom, a kitchenette. If you wanted to fix it up, use it as a nursery space or just somewhere to get away when the baby comes. David looked up sharply. Grace, you don't have to. I want to. And I realized it was true. This house was supposed to be a family home. Mom she couldn't figure out how to make it feel that way. Maybe we can. Amanda's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? I'm sure. We spent the next month renovating the garage apartment together. David knew carpentry. He'd learned it from our grandfather before he died. And I was surprisingly good at painting. Amanda picked out curtains and helped me sort through boxes of Mom's old furniture, deciding what could be cleaned up and repurposed. It was strange, working alongside David. We'd never been close as kids. He'd had his friends, his sports, his world. I'd had my books and my solitude. But now, measuring boards and debating paint colors, we started talking. Really talking. I used to blame you, he admitted one afternoon. We were painting the nursery a soft yellow, and his voice was careful. When Mom would miss my games or forget to pack my lunch, I'd think it was because she was too busy with you. Because you needed her more. I didn't need her more, I said quietly. She wanted to be there for me. With you, she had to force herself. That's worse, you know. Knowing she had to try. I set down my paint roller. David, what happened to her wasn't your fault. The man who did that to her, he's the villain in this story. Not you. Not even Mom, really. She was doing the best she could with something that broke her. Was it enough? He turned to look at me. Her best. I thought about all the school plays she'd missed. The quiet dinners where she'd barely spoken. The way she'd hugged me, stiff and uncertain, like she'd forgotten how. No, I said honestly. It wasn't enough. Not for you, not for me. But it's all we got. He nodded slowly. Amanda's therapist says I need to grieve the mother I should have had. That I can't keep waiting for her to become someone she wasn't capable of being. Is it helping? The therapy? Some days. He picked up his roller again. Some days I'm just angry. At Mom. At the man who hurt her. At James, even, for dying and leaving her alone. At you for having his face. I don't mind you being angry at me. I know. That's the problem. You're so damn understanding about everything. But he was almost smiling when he said it. The apartment was finished by the time Amanda hit her second trimester. David insisted on paying rent, and I insisted it be half what he'd pay anywhere else. We compromised. He'd cover utilities and maintenance on the main house, and we'd call it even. The first night they moved their things in, I made dinner. Pot roast, the way Mom used to make it. We sat at the kitchen table, the 3 of us, soon to be 4, and for the first time in my life, the house felt like it was supposed to feel. Warm. Full. Like a family. Mom would have liked this, David said suddenly. I looked at him. You think? I think she'd like knowing we figured it out. That we didn't let her mistakes destroy us. He paused. I think she'd be relieved. Amanda raised her water glass. To second chances. To second chances, David and I echoed. But not everyone was happy with our arrangement. Aunt Linda called 2 days later, her voice sharp with disapproval. Grace, I heard you're letting David live in the garage apartment. Are you out of your mind? It's my house, Aunt Linda. It should have been his house. You know that, don't you? You're not even really. She stopped herself. Not even really what? My voice was cold. Not even really family? I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. The extended family took sides quickly. Aunt Linda and her husband Uncle Paul thought I was being selfish. Mom's cousin Patricia thought David was being ungrateful. Mom's brother, Uncle Frank, who I'd always liked, called me one evening and said simply, "Your mother loved you both, just in different ways. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." It was Uncle Frank's words that stayed with me. The reading had been in late September. By December, snow was falling, and Amanda was showing enough that strangers asked when she was due. David had thrown himself into preparing the nursery with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He built a crib from scratch, sanded and stained it 3 times until it was perfect. He installed blackout curtains and a white noise machine and downloaded 7 different apps about infant sleep schedules. He's terrified, Amanda told me one afternoon. We were sitting in the main house kitchen. It had become our gathering place, neutral territory where the past and present could coexist. He keeps having nightmares that he'll hold the baby and feel nothing. That he'll look at his son the way your mom looked at him. He won't. How do you know? I thought about it. Because he's afraid of it. People who don't care don't worry about becoming bad parents. The fact that he's scared means he already loves that baby more than anything. Amanda's eyes welled up. Pregnancy had made her emotional, and she cried at commercials now. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you wish she'd left it all to David? Does it feel wrong, having everything? I looked around the kitchen. At the chicken salt and pepper shakers. At the window over the sink where Mom used to stand washing dishes, staring out at nothing. At the table where we'd eaten thousands of silent meals. I used to think she didn't love me, I said slowly. I thought I wasn't good enough, wasn't the right kind of daughter. Then I found out the truth, and I realized she loved me too much. So much it hurt. She looked at me and saw James, and it was like picking at a wound that never healed. That's not your fault. I know, but it wasn't David's fault either. I met her eyes. This house, the money, the inheritance. Mom gave it to me because I was all she had left of the man she loved. But David deserves to be here too. He deserves to know he belongs somewhere. Amanda reached across the table and took my hand. You're a good person, Grace. I'm just trying to fix what Mom broke. Maybe that's the same thing. Christmas came, and with it, a new complication. David's biological father showed up. I'd never thought about the man who assaulted my mother. In my mind, he was a faceless monster, someone who'd done a terrible thing and disappeared into the night. But he had a name, Robert Schaefer, and apparently he'd been living 2 towns over for the past 35 years. He came to the house on Christmas Eve. I opened the door to find a man in his late 50s, thin and weathered, with David's pale gray eyes. Can I help you? I said, my hand already reaching for my phone. I'm looking for David Morris. His voice was rough, like he smoked too much. I heard Margaret died. I need to talk to him. Everything in me went cold. You need to leave. I know who I am, he said quickly. I know what I did. But I have a right to meet my son. You have no rights. My voice shook with rage. You have nothing. Get off this property before I call the police. Grace. David's voice came from behind me. He'd heard the commotion and come down from the apartment. What's going on? Robert Schaefer's face changed when he saw David. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition maybe, or regret. You look like your mother. David went very still. Who are you? My name is Robert. I knew your mother a long time ago. He swallowed. I know you just found out about how you were conceived. I want you to know I didn't know about you. She never told me she was pregnant. If I'd known. If you'd known what? David's voice was dangerously quiet. You would have done the right thing? You would have stepped up. I was young. Stupid. I'd been drinking, and she was there, and I made a mistake. A mistake? David took a step forward. I put my hand on his arm, but he shook me off. You raped her. You destroyed her life. And you call it a mistake. I served time, Robert said quickly. 3 years. She did report it, eventually. I went to prison. I paid for what I did. 3 years. David laughed, harsh and broken. My mother spent 36 years flinching every time she looked at me, and you think 3 years makes it even? I know it doesn't. But I'm sick now. Cancer. I have maybe 6 months, and I wanted to meet you before. No. David's voice was final. You don't get a deathbed redemption. You don't get to ease your conscience by meeting me. I'm not your son. I'm nobody's son. I'm just the aftermath of what you did. Robert's face crumpled. Please. I just want to talk. Get out, I said. Now. Before I call the police and tell them you're violating a restraining order. There's no restraining order. There will be by tomorrow morning. I pulled out my phone. You have 10 seconds. He left. Stood there for a moment like he wanted to say something else, then turned and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away, memorizing his license plate. When I turned around, David was sitting on the stairs, his head in his hands. Are you okay? I asked, knowing it was a stupid question. He called it a mistake. David's voice was muffled, like he spilled coffee or forgot someone's birthday. A mistake. I sat down beside him. We stayed there for a long time, not speaking, just breathing together in the quiet house. Amanda found us on the stairs an hour later. She didn't ask questions, just sat down on David's other side and leaned her head against his shoulder. The three of us stayed there until the living room grew dark, and the Christmas lights on the tree across the street began to glow through the window. I filed a restraining order the next morning. I told them. Police report too. He won't come back. David nodded but didn't speak. He'd barely said a word since Robert left. You know what the worst part is, he said finally. For just a second, when he said he was sick, I felt sorry for him. Like some part of me wanted to give him what he was asking for. That's because you're a good person, Amanda said softly. Or a stupid one. No. I turned to look at him. It means you're not him. You're capable of empathy even for someone who doesn't deserve it. That's not weakness, David. That's proof you're nothing like him. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I need to know I won't be like him with my son. I need to know I won't hurt him. You won't. How can you be sure? Because you're already worried about it. Because you built a crib with your own hands and read 17 books about being a father. Because you're sitting here having this conversation instead of running away. I took his hand. Mom couldn't love you the way you needed, because she couldn't separate you from what happened to her. But you're not raising a child born from trauma. You're raising a child born from love. That makes all the difference. Amanda was crying now, quiet tears rolling down her cheeks. We picked a name, she said. We were going to wait until after Christmas to tell you, but his name is James. James David. My breath caught. After the man Mom loved, David finished. And after me. Amanda's idea. I looked at Amanda, this small fierce woman who'd somehow known exactly what we both needed to hear. That's perfect. I figure, David said, his voice rough. If Mom could love you because you reminded her of James, maybe I can learn to love myself by raising a child with his name. Maybe I can give him what she couldn't give me. You will, I said. I know you will. James David Morris was born on March 12th, during a late-season snowstorm that knocked out power to half the county. Amanda labored for 14 hours, and David held her hand through all of it, whispering encouragement and apologies and promises. I waited in the hospital corridor with Uncle Frank and Amanda's parents, drinking terrible coffee and watching snow pile up against the windows. When David finally came out, his face was streaked with tears. He's here, he said. He's perfect. And his voice broke. I looked at him, and I felt everything. Everything. I hugged him then, really hugged him, and felt him shake against me. Do you want to meet him? He asked. James was impossibly tiny, wrapped in a blue blanket with a little striped hat on his head. He had David's nose, Amanda's mouth, and when he opened his eyes for just a moment, they were dark and unfocused but somehow already wise. Hey little one, I whispered. I'm your Aunt Grace. David stood beside me, staring at his son with an expression of complete wonder. He looks like himself, he said. Not me. Not Amanda. Not anyone from the past. Just James. And he was right. This baby wasn't haunted by anyone's history. He was just a child brand new, with his whole life ahead of him. Mom would have loved him, I said. David was quiet for a moment. Then she would have. Maybe more than she could love us, but that's okay. We can love him enough for all of us. They came home to the house on Maple Street 3 days later. I'd spent those days preparing, cleaning the apartment, stocking the fridge, installing a baby monitor that connected to both units so I could hear if they needed help in the middle of the night. That first week was chaos. James cried at odd hours. Amanda was exhausted and in pain. David was running on adrenaline and terror, calling the pediatrician every time the baby sneezed. I brought them meals, held James while they showered, and learned how to change a diaper with the efficiency of a surgical nurse. Late one night, I heard crying through the monitor. Not James, David. I grabbed my robe and went to the apartment, knocked softly. David opened the door, James asleep against his shoulder. His eyes were red. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. What's wrong? He looked down at his sleeping son. He got fussy, and I picked him up, and he just stopped crying. Like I was what he needed. Like I was enough. His voice cracked. I never felt like I was enough for anyone. You are, I said. You always were. Mom just couldn't see it. I forgive her, he said suddenly. I don't know if I should, but I do. She was broken, and she did the best she could with the pieces she had left. She'd be proud of you. You think. I know. Spring came, and with it, the dogwood tree bloomed exactly as it always did. Pink and white flowers filled the branches, and I took a photo of David and Amanda standing beneath it. James bundled in Amanda's arms. 3 generations in front of Mom's house. Our house. And for the first time it felt right. We'd started having Sunday dinners together. Nothing fancy, just whatever I could throw together after work. David would bring James down, and we'd eat in the kitchen while the baby slept in his carrier on the table between us. Amanda would tell stories about her pregnancy cravings. David would worry about whether James was gaining enough weight. I'd listen and laugh and feel something warm and unfamiliar in my chest. Family. This was what family was supposed to feel like. The first anniversary of Mom's death fell on a Tuesday. I took the day off work, and David did too. We met at the cemetery in the morning, bringing flowers. White roses, her favorite. Her headstone was simple. Margaret and Morris. Beloved mother. The dates of her birth and death. Nothing about who she really was. The woman who'd survived trauma and tried to build a life anyway. The woman who'd loved a man named James so much she'd raised his daughter as her own. The woman who'd looked at her son and seen her worst nightmare, but kept him anyway because she believed every life deserved a chance. I don't know what to say to her, David admitted. We were standing side by side, James strapped to his chest in a carrier. The baby was 4 months old now, round-cheeked and alert, grabbing at everything in reach. You don't have to say anything. I feel like I should. Like there should be some big moment of closure where I tell her I understand, or I forgive her, or I'm angry with her. He touched the headstone gently. But mostly I just feel sad. Sad for her. Sad for us. Sad for all the years we spent in the same house but living in different worlds. I laid the roses at the base of the stone. She gave me everything because I reminded her of James. But she gave you something too, whether she meant to or not. What's that? She showed you exactly the kind of parent you didn't want to be, and you're using that to become the kind of parent you needed. David looked down at James, who was chewing on his own fist and making small satisfied noises. I tell him I love him every day. Multiple times a day. I probably say it too much. There's no such thing as too much. Amanda says I'm overcompensating. That I'm trying to give him everything I didn't get. Is that a bad thing? He smiled, but his eyes were still sad. I guess not. We stood there for a while longer, 3 generations connected by blood and choice and all the messy, complicated ways people become family. The sun was warm on our shoulders, and somewhere nearby a bird was singing. The world kept moving, indifferent to our grief, and somehow that felt okay. I'm glad she gave you the house, David said as we walked back to our cars. I was angry at first, but I'm glad now. You've made it into something she never could. A real alma. We made it into a home, I corrected. You, me, Amanda, James. All of us together. He stopped walking, turned to face me. Do you ever wish things were different? That you'd had a normal childhood with parents who were just parents? No trauma, no secrets, no inheritance drama? I thought about it. About James Harris, the father I'd never known. About Margaret Harris, the birth mother who couldn't bear to look at me. About Mom, who'd taken me in but never quite figured out how to let me all the way into her heart. About David, growing up knowing something was wrong but never understanding what. No, I said finally. Because if things were different, we wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have James. We wouldn't have figured out how to be family on our own terms. I touched his arm. Mom couldn't give us what we needed, so we're giving it to each other instead. David's eyes filled with tears. When did you get so wise? Probably somewhere between reading Mom's journals and watching you build a crib at 2 a.m. He laughed, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. James stirred against his chest, and David automatically started swaying. That gentle rocking motion all new parents learn. The movement was unconscious, natural. He'd become a father without even realizing it. That summer, we held James's baptism in the garden behind the house. It wasn't a religious thing. Neither David nor I were particularly faithful. But Amanda wanted something to mark his place in the world. To say, this child is loved, this child belongs, this child will never doubt where he came from. Uncle Frank officiated. Aunt Linda came, though she still didn't speak to me much. Amanda's whole family was there, along with neighbors and friends and David's co-workers. We set up tables under the dogwood tree and served lemonade and sandwiches and the strawberry cake that had been Mom's specialty. I'd learned to make it from her recipe cards. It took me 3 tries to get it right, but when I finally served it that day, David took 1 bite and went very still. This tastes exactly like hers, he said. I hope so. I followed her instructions to the letter. No, I mean, he set down his fork. I mean, it tastes like the birthdays when she'd try. When she'd make this cake and sing happy birthday and pretend, just for a day, that everything was normal. Those were good days. Yeah, they were. He looked around the garden, at James being passed from person to person, everyone wanting to hold him, to coo at him, to welcome him into the world. She'd like this. All of this. I think so too. Amanda appeared beside us, her camera in hand. Can I get a picture of you too? For James's baby book. We stood together, David and me, in front of the house that had shaped us both. The house where we'd grown up strangers. The house where we'd learned to be siblings. The house that Mom had left to me, but that had somehow become ours. Amanda snapped the photo, and I knew what it would look like. 2 people who shared no blood, but shared everything else. 2 people who'd been hurt by the same woman in different ways. Who'd found a way to forgive her without forgetting. 2 people who'd taken broken pieces and built something whole. I still live in the main house. David and Amanda still live in the apartment above the garage, though they're talking about buying their own place now that Amanda's pregnant again. A girl this time, due in November. They'll stay close though. Maybe just a few streets over. Close enough for Sunday dinners and emergency babysitting, and all the small rituals that make a family real. We talk about Mom sometimes. Not often. But when we do, it's easier now. We can acknowledge her failures without letting them define us. We can recognize her pain without excusing what it did to us. We can love her and be angry with her and forgive her all at once, because that's what family is. Complicated and messy and imperfect. James is learning to walk now. He toddles through the house, his small hands leaving prints on everything. His laughter filling rooms that were silent for too long. Sometimes I look at him and try to see my father, James Harris, the man I never knew. But mostly I just see a child who will grow up knowing he's loved, who will never question whether he belongs, who will have what David and I never did. A family that chose each other, not out of obligation or guilt or the ghost of a dead romance, but because we wanted to, because we decided that the past didn't have to dictate the future. Because we learned that family isn't about who gave birth to you or whose DNA you carry. It's about who shows up. Who stays? Who builds a crib at 2 in the morning and makes strawberry cake from recipe cards and stands beside you in a cemetery on a Tuesday morning? Because grief is easier when you don't face it alone. I think about that day in the lawyer's office sometimes. The shock on David's face. The envelope with Mom's confession. The moment everything changed. If you'd asked me then whether we'd survive it, I'm not sure what I would have said. The betrayal felt too big. The hurt too deep. The inheritance too uneven. But here we are. 2 siblings who aren't siblings. A house that's not just mine. A family built from broken pieces and second chances. And all the messy, complicated ways people learn to love each other. Mom left me her house, her money, her mother's jewelry. She left David a letter, and a wound that took years to heal. But in the end, she gave us both something more valuable than any inheritance. She gave us each other. It just took us a while to figure out what to do with it. Would you have fought for the inheritance? Would you have shared it? Would you have been able to forgive the mother who couldn't love you? Or the sibling who got everything you deserved? I'd love to know what you think. Sometimes the hardest part of any story isn't the betrayal. It's figuring out how to move forward after the truth comes out. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, if it made you think about your own family in a new way, I hope you'll share it. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to figure out what family means. And sometimes we get to choose.